This is Del K. Brereton, and this is the Shiloh Institute on a Friday. Yeah, I got the dome kind of trimmed up. I was just going for a little different look. For those who know me, I like to switch it up, so I just switched it back up. Um, but for now, my bald head again, as they would say. But listen, I want to have a quick conversation. Been having various conversations on different platforms, and on every platform, different things seem to come up. Do I need that? I think I might need that. No, yes, no, maybe. But different things seem to come up in respect to when I'm having conversations with people who identify as Hebrew Israelites. And this station is no foreigner and no stranger. I have many new friends and old friends, that those in North America, those in Canada, those in the United States, those in Israel, and around the world, Africa, England, who identify as a Hebrew Israelite. And what I thought was just something I really, and really this is for Facebook, because this is where I've come across a little more people who don't necessarily know me, and so for they're trying to have more of an argument than exclusively for this platform, but more for the Facebook platform. But I'm going to share it to Facebook afterward. I wanted to have those discussions and talk about the similarities and the differences. God bless you to L.A. Hopkins. The similarities and the differences in what I have found and what I have discovered in my research and my studies and my experience in respect to the nuances of similarity and differences and the spectrum of differences amongst the Christian, the Hebrew Israelite, and in respect to the Hebrew Israelite, the varying different Hebrew Israelite perspectives that I have found and I have come across. So, in my drive, I would like to have that discussion with you, if you will allow me. I always believe that it's never fair to have a one-sided conversation when you're talking about two different belief systems, especially when you are a hard proponent for one, as I am. And those who know me understand that I am Christian and understand that I'm a Christian bishop, and that my studies, of course, come from a perspective of Christologically identifying Christ as, and therefore, right away, some perspectives right away would say that, well, you're not going to be fair in this conversation. This is not a debate, and this is not a comparison of which is right and which, because I can't have that by myself. What I want to identify is the things that I heard in respect to Hebrew Israelites, and I want to know what the consensus is from your side of the fence, and I want the Hebrew Israelite to understand what the Christian perspective is, and especially the Christian perspective that comes from a person of the diaspora who knows the Christian history, who understands the very blackness of the Bible and the very blackness of the Christian faith, both ancient faith and I would say I would call it modern ancient. When I say modern ancient, it's a very bad term, but just so you understand it, what I'm saying from the 1st century on to the 5th century, and ancient meaning from even the very beginning of the Bible itself. Okay, so let's go. You ready? You're ready to go? You're ready to go, Satchel? Good to see you. Miss Ann, everybody, good to see you. Let's have that conversation, and let's start. On your mark, get set, go. So, the Israelite, the Hebrew Israelite that I have come across is the perspective of both the diaspora African and the continental African, believing that those peoples who are part of West Africa, those peoples who are part of the Middle Passage, who have landed in the Caribbean, who have landed in North America as people of color. These individuals are part of the lost tribes of Israel, and therefore should represent themselves as the biblical Israel of the Bible. And so that, I'll leave that as a very basic definition to keep it very wide, and then I'll add some other nuances to it. What I have seen added on to this, which puzzles me, it really does puzzle me, is that not only has the West African, and it's mainly West African that I've identified this with, but of course, we know from looking into the book of Acts, specifically Acts chapter 8, that Ethiopians were practicing the Mosaic faith, whether they were converts or whether they identified as original Israelites. I won't address that at this time, but we have documented evidence through the scriptures that Ethiopia was practicing what we can I refer to as the Mosaic faith, right? I don't just say Judaism, but I say the Mosaic faith. They were practicing the Mosaic faith. Acts chapter 8, check it out for yourself. We see the Ethiopian eunuch who is reading. He has come to worship. He's come for Passover. He's come for the holy days, and he's reading the book of Isaiah, and he meets one of the apostles, Philip, and has a conversation, has a conversion moment from being a Mosaic believer to being a Christian. Very powerful conversation for this particular conversation, but I will put that at the end. What puzzles me about the Hebrew Israelite revelation and identification of their Aboriginal Hebraic roots is the inclusion of Latinos. This is interesting to me, and I find it to be something where I had to take an issue with that personally, and it stopped me from going any further in my own personal pursuit of the academic aspect of the possibility of that movement at the time. And I came across this movement, how old was I? I was probably around 29, and I was invited, at the time a Christian, a new convert to Christianity, a very newer convert, even though Christianity is something that I grew up in, because of what we feel in the Anabaptist / Pentecostal faith, that true Christianity occurs when you really make a true confession and get baptized. Although I was raised as a Christian, I considered myself a new Christian in my late 20s, and somebody who was studying and wanting to live the way, wanting to live the book out. And so when I came across these amazing brothers who identified as Hebrew Israelite, I didn't know what that was. I'd never heard of it before, and I was shocked. I came across a school in Toronto of young people who knew the Bible so well. I was speaking. I was doing some kind of positive speaking about something. I forget what it was at the time. I was a policeman too, so I was there in that capacity as being a black policeman and speaking at this black school of young black kids, and I was using biblical references, and I realized these young kids, they knew every reference. I was like, oh my gosh. I said, how do you guys know the Bible so well? They said, oh, this is a Hebrew Israelite school. You didn't know? I said, no, I did not know. And what are Hebrew Israelites? And so that's how I came across them. And so I continued fellowshipping, coming out to their lessons, listening to some of the brothers talk. We're all about the same age, and listening to how they interpreted the scripture and what they were saying in respect to the scripture. And then I liked everything I heard. I was actually I was intrigued. I was intrigued at their interpretation of Deuteronomy 28. I was intrigued because I understood that most of the history of the Bible comes from an Afro-Hamitic and Afro-Shemitic perspective. So I was all in that. But then when they threw in that the Latinos are part of this movement, I said, I don't understand. I'm lost. I said, I'm lost for two reasons. that you must identify that the very word Latino, it means it's not that these people can't be Hebrew. They're Latins. A Latin and a Hebrew are different people. Latins are Romans, Europeans, and therefore, how could you consider somebody to be a Latin and to be a Hebrew? That was my first stumbling block. My second was understanding that the people that they were referring to were both a hybrid Aboriginal people of the South Americas and the Caribbean, but of the South Americas. And I'm like, these people are indigenous Indians who are either speaking Portuguese or Spanish or are mixed with Portuguese or Spanish, hence Latino. So I'm like, how do you not know the history of these people to acquaint them with people who are clearly lost in their historical understanding and historical history, clearly could be identified as being individuals who are part of the 10 tribes. But these people are, we know who they are. They're Aboriginal, they know who they are too. And so I had a little bit of issue with that, in respect to and I said, are they converts, or you're saying that these people are originally parts of the 10 tribes? And they said, no, they're part of the original 10 tribes too. And I felt that that was an American nuance that wanted to include the Latino in a struggle against a colonized European front. And I felt, well, you're just including Latino people now. Like how sometimes black people include Indian people. I know in the States you call Mexicans and Latinos brown. In Canada, we call brown people Indians, people from India. And a lot of times now what we have in the color wars of North America is Indians and blacks are almost united sometimes to be considered to be kind of one front, even though they have completely different colonizer experiences. And I felt that's what was happening there. And I want to pause. I want to pause there. Okay, so nobody has any comments about that. So that for me, when I was studying the Hebrew Israelite scenarios, I felt that didn't make a lot of sense to me, and I felt that it lacked scholarship. That opinion, including the Latinos in that, lacked a lot of scholarship, and they lost me there. And I still haven't been able to get a proper answer from any Hebrew Israelite. And I will leave that for them to answer, because that is their issue to answer. It's not mine to answer. It's mine to say I don't see it. It's mine to say the geography and the history don't match, the language don't match, the people don't match. I don't see it. But if you want to show it to me, please show it to me. So that was my number one stumbling block. But I put that on the back burner because I've only found one brother. I think I did a live with him that was a Latino Hebrew Israelite brother. But mostly the brothers and sisters I found were mostly diaspora Africans. And so the conversation I have with them has nothing to do with the Latino issue for the most part. It's speaking to them specifically. So I focus on that. And this is the other thing that comes up. This incredible disdain for Christianity. And I always pause at black people who have an issue with Christianity, because I know many times it comes from either the disdain, the bad taste in their mouth comes from either a 20th century Christianity or the lack of true a 20th century Christianity, or a erroneous historical perspective that Europeans gave slaves Christianity. And number three, an learned position of that Christianity was actually forged mostly in academia in Africa. Most of Christian scholarship, most of Christian leadership, early leadership in Christianity It is very, very, very talking about this time. The 1st century to the 5th is very African. Christianity from the 1st century to the 5th century is very, very, very African. What does that I mean by that? Most of the scholarship, most of the leadership, most of the great minds come from Africa, period. Athanasius, Tertullian, Sibelius, a lot of these individuals, I know some people don't like some of these people, but a lot of the early scholarship comes from Alexandria, which is Egypt, comes from non-European scholars. Okay, the list can go on. I can continue. It's a long list. The fathers of both the West. I'm not going to continue if I pause again because I don't want this to be a choppy live. I will just redo it where I get where I'm going, and I have very strong Wi-Fi. But I'll just repeat if I did miss that. Most of the early Christian scholars were Afro-Semitic men. The early apostles were Afro-Semitic men, which means, of course, that Jesus himself is an Afro-Semitic man. It speaks to the fact, and this is what it speaks to. It speaks to the fact that Christianity could never have been the colonizers' invention to control slaves in the 15th century. If in the 1st, 2nd, 3rd, 4th, 5th century, Christianity both came from and was rooted in the Afro-Semitic people of the world. And so it is very important to teach people who have an issue with Christianity from the basis of race, black people, that Christianity should be the thing that black people lean to the most. More so than Islam. Way more than Islam. Islam comes 700 years after Christianity. Islam is an invention of Bedouins